This is what the vast majority of modern work boots look like when you cut them in half. Full of soft, squishy materials, synthetics. And unfortunately, they're just not the most durable or supportive boots that money can buy. But if you're looking at the upper echelon of quality boots, they look like this. Absolutely chock full of leather. This is like 6 layers of leather. You can see the nails going through. This outer leather is like twice as thick as most modern work boots. And these are Pacific Northwest boots. They're my favorite style of boots. They're the most superlative, most over the top, most ridiculously built boots that money can buy, especially when it comes to the work boot world. But when you really amp up the durability, the support, you start to lose a little bit of the comfort. You lose a little bit of the flexibility, the articulation that you feel from a more modern work boot. And so that's why we designed the Bear Slayers, basically the perfect Pacific Northwest boots, trying to make the absolute most comfortable Pacific Northwest boot that money could buy. And through this process, we worked with JK on their OT platform, and we worked with Nix on their Flexwork Pro for this launch that is launching today at the time of this video launch. I did 3 whole videos on Rose Anvil 2 going through all the details. So I thought instead it'd be kind of a cool way to look at 2 different platforms in the OT and the Flexwork Pro that we've collaborated on and really compare them. And not just a comparison of the materials and how they're structured, but this is something that we've spent a lot of time collaborating, designing, prototyping, wear testing. So I have more experience in these 2 platforms than most boots, because both of those platforms were the brand's attempt at taking this really cool, historical, over-the-top boot and making it just a little bit more attainable, a little bit easier to wear for the average guy that wants a little bit lighter version of the most ridiculous boots in the world. So first, what are the contenders that we're actually looking at? So the first one, the brand is JK Boots. The style is the OT. They've got a couple different variations. The OT in the regular leather is $510. Their bison leather, it's a premium leather, comes in at $595. And they're made in Spokane, Washington, USA. And the way they position this product, the OT, fully manufactured in the USA, are premium all-purpose work boot. Middleweight designed to do everything from job sites to the office to casual wear. 50% thicker premium leather, 132 Vibram unit sole, 360 stitch down construction, fully rebuildable and resolable. Key features include the high flex design. Our proprietary flex design combines a tapered leather midsole with an all leather build to create a boot that moves the way your body was meant to move. Instead of forcing your foot in a rigid shape, the construction flexes naturally, softening with wear and forming to you over time. The OT is possibly our most versatile boot designed to date. The OT stands for overtime, meaning this hybrid work boot is not just meant for clock in and out days, but for long hours, varied conditions, and last minute hiking trips. The dual sport design offers an exceptional balance of agility, comfort, and support, making the perfect choice for a city or mountain terrain. So that clearly matches up with what I think their attempt is with the OT boot. Take all this, all the ruggedness, and pare it down just a little bit. Instead of a heavyweight class, middleweight class. And now to the Nix platform we built the Bear Slayers on, the Flexwork Pro. The brand is Nix, the style is the Flexwork Pro. They retail for $614 for standard leather. And similar story with Nix, they usually have a premium price point for the bison leather. They're made in Spokane, Washington, USA. And the way they position this product is the Flexwork Pro breaks the mold of our traditional work boots with unmatched flexibility and rugged durability. Built with a 360 stitch down construction and softer Vibram honey lug sole, it conquers traction, water resistance, long-lasting durability like no other. Its padded collar and upper notch bend with you every move, while the natural toe splay of the Thurman NW last guarantees fearless, all-day comfort with 0 break-in time. Take on any challenge, Flexwork Pro is made for those who dare to work harder, move faster, and stand stronger. So very similar positioning. You know, it's all about making this a little bit lighter, a little bit more versatile, a little bit more flexible. And so that's why I wanted to compare these. So now let's start looking at it. And because really the leather is a really easy thing to cover. It's very similar because most of these brands source their leathers from the same tanneries, or at least similar qualities. So both of these are bison leather. They're going to be that premium price point. They also offer both of these in the regular leathers. They're a little bit more affordable. But bison is one of the coolest leathers because, and you might be like, why is bison so hairy? This is not hair. This is the suede side or the rough outside. It's on the inside of the cow. So that's why it's really furry, because it's not that smooth, like literal texture of skin that's on the outside of the animal. That smooth texture is flipped at the inside because you can see all that smoothness. But look at all the pebbles. So this pebbling is because it's a shrunken bison. So they take that bison, instead of stretching it out to get as much yield as possible, they let it shrink, creating those pebbles. But what is the effect of that for the end user? Well, it's basically like pre-broken in. These are so soft and malleable. These little pebbles make pre-break-in points where they can flex really easily. And this stuff is thick. It comes in at like 3 to 3.5 millimeters thick for both the brand. We ran the puncture test with these results. And it's just one of the coolest leathers and one of the most durable but supple and soft leathers that you can buy. But what about the inside of the boots? Because because honestly, maybe my favorite thing about this kind of boot is that there's no synthetics inside of your shoe that are gonna slowly wear out, get really stinky, like modern work boots. They're really comfy and they're really affordable, but they stink and they wear out and they're hot. And it's because they throw tons of synthetics in there to make them slightly more comfortable. Whereas with these old school boots, like the Pacific Northwest boots, it is just a slab of like 3mm leather and no lining whatsoever in the quarters, just a little lining in the toe. And that's because they don't need a lining on the inside because they use such thick, heavy duty leather. And you can see there's no insole. There's just a half sock liner that covers all those nails that could kind of create a little bump. You don't want to hook your socks on accident. And then it's just raw leather all through your forefoot. And that's where you get the comfort from this style of boots. Because this is a version of comfort because you're squishing into the foam, you're squishing into the soft materials, and it's taking the shape of your foot basically in every single step. But the idea with leather is instead of every step it compresses, you slowly over time compress this leather to create a literal footprint inside of your boots. So it has the same effect, but the downside of the Heritage Way is it takes at least a month to get them fully broken in. So how do these two boots compare? Basically identical on the inside. They got a fully gusseted tongue, completely unlined through the top of the boot, but through the toe of the boot, it's got a lining, half sock liners on the inside, so basically identical. But a couple more important design differences is the Nyx has this padded collar where the JKs just have a standard collar, and that's you know, it's pretty understandable how that's more comfortable because it gives you a little bit of squish. It's a similar concept to standing on carpet, but if you really want your boots tight around your ankle and you don't want dirt and grime getting in there, when you tie a traditional boot, all that movement goes straight into that hard line. And if you really tie them tight, you're kind of choking the top of your foot. And over time, after a few months of wear, you don't really feel it nearly as much. But the benefit of a padded collar is you can still cinch it down tight, but it doesn't feel as tight because you have some give from the padded collar. And another difference is the Nyx Flexwork Pro has one little cutout that allows these boots to flex a little bit more, whereas the JK is just a traditional quarter with no cutouts. And that's why when we moved the Bear Slayers over to Nyx, I was like, this is a perfect platform to do it on. You guys already have one of these cutouts. Let's just add 3 more. And so that's why you have 4 cutouts in the Bear Slayers. And the effect of that is one of the bigger pain points of Pacific Northwest boots is as you're wearing these, all this leather, when you bend forward, has to crumple and compress and slowly form its way out of the way of your foot so it's more comfortable. So what Nyx did is just create one little cut in there to give it a pivot point so it allows the boot to flex a little bit more naturally. Now, if we start looking at the actual construction, like I said, these are some of the toughest boots. You can see this is like a 2-inch nail going up all the way through all the stacks of leather. You got these little clinch nails all over the place. And this is the old school traditional way of doing it. You've got the 270 stitch down construction at the toe, then you have everything else is all nailed together with all these nails. But the problem is we dissected a pair of Nyx early on in the channel, and not even per pair, but per boot, there's over 80 nails per boot. So per pair, you get like 116 nails in your boots. And when you have 116 nails in your hands, that's a lot of weight. That's a lot of just steel underneath of your feet that you have to carry around. But when you need the most durable boots, you need the most durable construction, which is this construction. But when you're trying to make a little bit lighter version, more flexible version, versatile version, both of these brands make their Flexwork Pro and OT in a 360 stitch down construction. Initially, JK did it like this, like the Bear Slayers, the Gen 1 Bear Slayers, where we got the 270 and the nailed heel, but they've since moved their OT to a 360 stitch down construction. And same thing with the Flexwork Pro. It's built a lot more like their tactical boots where it's 360 stitch down, where you have 2 rows in the front and 1 row in the back. So why would they switch from the old school construction to a 360 stitch down? Well, it goes right into what they're trying to bake into these styles of boots. They're trying to be more flexible. So when instead of having that leather tucked under the insole, it's flared out. So you have less rigidity to flex around. It's more spread out. You don't need a bunch of nails through 2/3 of the boot to tuck that upper end and cinch it down with the nails, because you just have it flared out and stitched down, so it reduces the amount of nails. Then for the functionality of the boot, having everything flared out, there's no gaps for dirt and grime to get in, for water to get in, to slowly start sneaking its way in there. It's not as supportive because you don't have everything tucked under, but you eliminate the ability for anything to get into the inside of your boot through this gap right there. Maybe the biggest difference construction-wise between these two boots, they both attempted to reduce the amount of materials on the inside, reduce the height of the heel, and still keep as much of the value in these boots as possible. And so the way that JK has done it is they took this full length midsole that you can see runs all the way through here, and you can see it on the inside right there. And instead of running it full length like their full Super Duty, they just cut it off short right where the boot flexes. So that way, in the toe of the boot, you've got all this beautiful flex, but then through the rest of the boot, it's really structured. You get all that extra arch support by having that midsole. You get the stability of having that midsole through the heel. It's not as torsionally flexible. And so it kind of combines the flexibility you're looking for with the stability in the heel of their traditional boots. Versus the way Nix does it, they completely omitted that entire midsole. So instead of a big leather midsole and a small slip sole that helps the rubber outsole bond to the rest of the boot, they basically just beefed up that slip sole into, I think it's like an 8-iron rubber midsole, so it reduces the bulk and the weight even more. And it makes it a lot more flexible through here, which could be a pro and con. It depends on what you're looking for. Because out of these two boots, this one's a little bit more structured, a little bit more stable, has a little bit more arch support. But the downside of having this much flex is you lose some of that structure, you lose some of that stability, you lose a little bit of that really hard locked in the boot feel. But we did lose a little bit of the arch support between the Gen 1 and Gen 2. And the way we try to mitigate that initially, even with the very first prototype of the Bear Slayers, was the bear hug arch support. So you can see on the outside of the boot, very traditional, but on the insides of the boots, you can see we dropped that quarter down straight down and angled it in a little bit more this year to clear that big toe knuckle, make it a little more comfortable, to just grip that arch, add a little bit more bulk underneath of your instep to build that up a little bit more. And that helps kind of split the difference and adds a little bit of extra arch support to this. But at the end of the day, the JK still has more arch support. But if there's one thing that makes these two boots really feel different comfort-wise, it comes down to the shape of the toe or the last that these are built on. Because the last is a hard plastic shape of the boot that they build everything around that gives it its distinct toe profile, toe height, width, everything that makes the boot fit the way it does comes down to the last. And you can see there's very different lasts. The JK OT is a very traditional Pacific Northwest firefighting logger last where it's pretty narrow and it tapers at the toe. And the reason they do that is because these traditionally, even 100 years ago, they wanted your foot locked in and they wanted your foot to bulge out the sides so that even when they're broken in, you're still really secured in your boots. Because when you're just side heeling all day, every day, that little bit of slop will give you blisters, wears out your feet, wears out your boots. And so this was a function-based design specifically for heavy-duty use. But when it comes to making it more comfortable, more versatile, more anatomical, that's where the Flexwork Pro really shines. Because what Nix did is they dug out one of the most famous lasts of all time, the Munson last. It was designed by Dr. Munson for World War II, because basically they had the same problem. They're like, all these military boots are basically dress boots. They're really pointy, even more pointy than these, because that's just basically what they were making back in the day. There's a whole story about it. Go watch the Munson last video we did with Nix if you want more information. But the effect of that last is you can see how much more straight that big toe is. So it's not pulling your big toe in until you get them broken in. And then it's got lots and lots of room through your other toes, especially your pinky toe. And so this is a lot more foot shaped, and this shapes to your foot over time, and sometimes your foot shapes a little bit to it. And so when it comes to comfort, that Thurman NW last is way more comfortable. And then as for everything else, you know, both brands offered the Honey Vibram and the regular black Vibram. They're the exact same outsoles. We ran the ball and bar drop test. We ran all of our other tests, and you can see they perform very similarly. And really everything else that's different is on the inside. And even when we were designing this, I wasn't even fully sure how the Flexwork Pro was designed. Is it just a simple insole with the midsole? How is it structured? So we're gonna cut these in half and finally see how the Nix Flexwork Pro is built and how it compares to the OT boot. All right, it's time to finally see what's inside the Flexwork Pro. How is it built? How does it compare to the OT platform? What's different? Why does it feel different? And if you're not subscribed, consider pushing that subscribe button. Help us out by giving us a like. Check out the Bear Slayers, limited quantities. So if you missed this drop or they're sold out, just get on the limited edition email list. I'll do my best to get Nix to do another run of these at some point. So now let's see what's inside. These boots are way more similar than I thought they were gonna be. I thought for sure there was something completely different going on the inside because the JKs have more arch support. And you can see how much more contoured that is compared to the Nix Flexwork Pro. Even though they both have a slip sole basically lineman shank. The JK just extends all the way to the end of the boot, where this is more used as a filler material and a shank and arch support. They both have that full length veg tan insole, the half sock liner. On the Bear Slayers, I had them put a little bit of a thinner counter in there just to make them more flexible, but I think the full Flexwork Pro come with the full thickness counter. But these are basically identical. So then why is that the case? Where do you get the extra arch support from the JKs? Well, there is this little bit of extra filler material that's maybe a 1/4 inch of extra height in it, but that's not gonna account for all the differences in how these feel. What it really comes from is the actual last. Because we talked about the different toe shapes, but that's not the only important thing when it comes to a last. It also matters the contouring of it underneath the foot, because this OT boot is built on the exact same last, I think, as their Super Duty boots, with all the extra layers, the arch support, the leather heel stack. And so what they did is they took this high heel last and put on a lower heel boot, basically dropping that heel lower, but keeping a lot of the arch support. The downside of that is you get a really sprung toe. And even after you wear these for a really long time, you can see how much flatter the Flexwork Pro sits compared to that really sprung toe of the OT. And some people like that look, but when it comes to actually wearability, you do have to kind of beat that toe down to take the shape, and the toe wants to curl up extra, and it's not quite as comfortable as an actually like flat anatomical shape. But the downside of doing this with the Thurman last is you do lose a little bit of that arch support. You can see that difference in the contouring. And that's how we try to fix it, by wrapping that bear hug arch support underneath of this. And that's why this boot isn't a 360 stitch down construction, because I wanted that extra arch support. I wanted that tucked underneath so you can build up that arch support even if it's a lower arch boot. And you can see it creates a little bump right there where all that panel is tucked underneath of there. So now that we've looked at everything, what is the big takeaway from this? Well, I think if I was to sum it up, I would say comparing the two, the NYX Flexwork Pro is more comfortable. It's more anatomical. It's more naturally shaped. They have the flex cut. They've got the padded collar. They got that Thurman last. They've got the lower arch. They've got a lighter construction, but the JK is a lot closer to the traditional boots. You got that really rigid lineman shank that creates that hard pivot point. It's really aggressive in the last by building up that arch support and keeping that toe fairly tight as you bulge it out to give you all that support. And it's just a little bit closer to the average boots, but you lose the comfort. You lose that natural feel. Because the Flexwork Pro feels as close to a modern work boot as I felt from a Pacific Northwest boot. Whereas the JKs feel just kind of like a pared down version of Pacific Northwest boot. So the final questions, which one's more flexible? Which one's more articulate? Definitely the NYX. Which one's more stable? Which one's more supportive? The JK OT. And I think that pretty well sums it up. I think that covers all the most important parts. Now you know the differences in design and construction and why they feel so different and why you might want one over the other. So if you do want to prepare Bear Slayers, check out the NYX Bear Slayers below. This is the Gen 2, where we evolved the design off the Gen 1 with JK. So check these out below, and thank you guys for all your support. Hopefully you enjoyed this, and let me know what else you want to see comparison-wise. And let me know how I can continue to perfect the Bear Slayer, the PPNW, because I don't think we've quite nailed it. I think there's still some room for growth. So thank you guys. See ya.